morning, sir.
Yeah,
Thanks for joining us.
yeah.
As
Thanks a lot.
president
Thanks a lot.
of the Tobago Business Association, we've heard these statements about looming or active food shortages in Tobago. I saw release from Faith Be Israel that those are inaccurate. What say you from the business community perspective? Good morning, Richard, by the way.
Good morning.
Yeah. Hi. Good morning, all of you, and good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. The thing is, what I found interesting is that, first of all, I saw two rather corpulent-looking gentlemen coming forth and speaking about a food shortage. I mean, I think for starters, certainly if there was a food shortage, it doesn't seem to be affecting them at all. Let's start with that. But separate and apart from that, there's the issue of the fact and figures, Paul, because, I always ask the hard questions and I say, okay, if there is this great food crisis, then let's see the hard facts, the figures. Let us see where, business persons can produce their stock books, their stock records, their warehouse records, and show, well, look, I ordered 10 bales of sugar and I got one or I got none, or, this is my inventory record to show that my supply. You only hear the histrionics and, the cries that, like Chicken Little, the sky is falling. But yet still nobody produces any hard data to support these claims. And I'll tell you why I ask these questions. The point is, we always have to be brave enough to ask the difficult and uncomfortable questions in circumstances such as this. Because you look at this scenario, most of the food supply that comes to Tobago from Trinidad or elsewhere would come up on the smaller trucks, which would be the 1 ton and 1.5 ton trucks. These trucks have always been facilitated on the fast ferry vessels. So therefore, the lack of the cargo star could not in any way be affecting these things. Even if you're talking about bags of sugar, bags of flour, a normal 1 ton, 1.5 ton truck could bring those, even a 3 ton truck, which is sometimes facilitated on the fast ferry. So therefore, where is all of this drama coming from? And, I saw the release, exactly what you mentioned there from Faith Be Israel. And, she herself has raised some questions, some of which I have posited also, because I said, listen, isn't Tobago concerned about the bigger issue, the bigger question of its inability to feed itself? You keep talking about you want autonomy, you want independence, you want this. One cargo vessel is down for a week or two, and you are in a food crisis. What does that say about your production of food? If you recall, years ago, Tobago used to be the food basket. Tobago used to be producing enough food to export up the Caribbean to supply Trinidad. Nothing is being planted, nothing is being grown. Aren't these the bigger questions that Tobagonians should be concerning themselves about, more than, worrying about what might be an artificially generated crisis? So, I have always been one who, regardless of what the masses are saying or what the general opinion is, I've always been one to stand up and question things and say, hey, is there another way of looking at this? Is there another way of analyzing this, or assessing this? And that is why I have asked these questions in that way. So I think that definitely, unless and until I can see some hard empirical evidence to say that there really is a food shortage or a food crisis, I am not yet convinced that there is.
Is this a more of a business / profitability cry from some members of the business community, as opposed to an actual food shortage? In other words, a stock and inventory issue that they're projecting ahead on, that they want to stave off if they think it may affect their profitability?
Well, it might be. I don't want to speculate, but my point is, if you're telling me that, look, you cannot get the large flatbeds and the big trailers, which would bring up things like I-beams, long lengths of steel, precast concrete products, the huge bags of sand, or the massive pallets of cement, then if you tell me those things for the construction industry, for hardwares and stuff like that, then I could understand that, because those things could only come on the cargo vessel, right? But when you start, ratcheting up this conversation about, a food shortage, I think, I don't know, unless we really have the evidence to prove that, I think that we have to be careful of, not crying wolf in the circumstances.
And I thought it strange, to be very honest, as I told my colleague in the newsroom the day before yesterday when I heard it, that if there were a food shortage in Tobago, or a looming food shortage, given what we've come to expect of Mr. Augustine, the chief secretary, he would have been shouting from the top of the mountain about it.
Front and center, he would have been, and he would have probably parlayed it to say that it's a plot by Trinidad to starve Tobagonians to death, and, et cetera, because, the platform rhetoric, they sometimes get carried away with. But you're quite right, Paul. And instead, Faith B. Israel, who is, I think, deputy leader in the party, the newly formed party, or certainly one of the higher ups, and she's the secretary for health. She has basically rubbished the claim about a food shortage, and, my question also is, why aren't we looking at these bigger picture issues? I've also raised the issue in my capacity as chairman of the Tobago Business Chamber as to why Port Authority has not provided a second cargo vessel for this run, in the sense that, okay, as part of proper planning and management of any entity or any enterprise, one would think that you always cater for a backup, because you know that things can happen. So therefore, it seems incumbent upon them that they ought to consider getting a second vessel. So therefore, even when things like this happen, you have a vessel that can come into service, or maybe even share the workload, so that one vessel doesn't get overburdened and you have to then put it on dry dock for months because it has so much work to do, that kind of thing. That just seems to me part of proper responsible planning. So those are two issues that I would say we need to highlight in the circumstances, rather than talking about maybe what might be a contrived food crisis.
The recent comment about the issue related to the air bridge also is something that we haven't spoken to you since it happened. The CAL pilots and the ancillary issues related to that, because yes, it affected international passengers, but it also affected the local air bridge significantly. And
yes,
and it's not the first time. And there have been several remedies proffered. I know before the assembly would have subsidized the Virgin, that had to stop because it was deemed unsustainable. What do you think? Where do you think the solution lies?
Well, the thing is, I think we have to first understand and approach the air bridge as a necessary and fundamental part of the transportation system in Trinidad and Tobago, in the sense that, the connectivity between the islands is not a favor. It is not something that you can, as the CEO of CAL so glibly and, in a puerile fashion tries to say, well, it's not a profitable route. It has nothing to do with profitability. It's almost as absurd as trying to say, well, let's look at Port of Spain General Hospital. For all these years, it hasn't made a profit, so let's close it down. It's an essential service. You are dealing with a scenario where there are so many situations where persons have, for business reasons, for medical emergencies, for whatever, they need to have that fast access of transport between Trinidad and Tobago. So we need to first of all have that mindset in relation to the air bridge. Secondly, there are many ways that you can actually make it more profitable than it is, even though you may never achieve a level of overall profitability. But there are ways that you can increase your efficiencies on the service, right? And they do not explore that. We have suggested as a business chamber that you introduce a 2-tiered or a 3-tiered fare system. So in other words, all right, the current basic fare is $400 for a round trip. Then what we have suggested is you introduce a $500 fare, a $600 fare, you know. So therefore, if it is that someone comes and they says, well, look, I don't have a booking, but I need to get to Tobago, they say, all right, you see, you will pay the $600 price if you really want to go. And you would find that most people who really have a genuine emergency, they will have no problem paying that. So therefore, you are getting, look how easily you're getting $200 extra from one person. If you have, say, for instance, 500 persons for the day paying that, you know, do the math, if you understand me. And it's a simple thing. So in other words, you are allowing persons who have genuine emergencies or who need to travel immediately the option to say, well, look, hey, pay the higher fare and you will go immediately. You know?
Wasn't that the thinking, though, Martin, behind the $50 change fee? Is it
not at all. Not at all. The $50 change fee is a punitive penalty that has been imposed, and it's the most absurd thing. You know, I mean, listen to how palpably absurd and patently stupid it is. I have personally experienced this, and I can tell you as a fact. All right, in a scenario where I had a Tobago, Port of Spain, Tobago round trip booked on CAL. All right, I had another ticket purchased because I moved up my travel date and I came to Trinidad earlier, right? Using CAL, okay? Right. When I went to the airport in Piaco to use the return leg of the other ticket to come back, they said, no, I cannot use that. I have to pay a fee to reverse the order of the ticket. Now, imagine the nonsense we're talking here. So I said, well, what are you talking about? They said, well, we don't have any evidence as to how you got to Trinidad because you didn't use the first leg of this. I said, what the hell does it matter? I am here.
Exactly. Yes.
Even if I took the boat and came down, what does it matter to you?
Even if they beam me across.
or even if I did not want to
across, so you swim.
And swim
like
to Trinidad.
Yeah.
But they are saying you have to pay now a reversal fee to reverse the order of the ticket and then a date change fee.
You know,
that's
I think one of the fundamental flaws in this thinking in this scenario with the air bridge is that CAL amalgamates the Tobago Trinidad air bridge route with the regional and international operations. And I'll tell you why. It goes back to the premise you referenced earlier on. This is not a profit. This is Trinidad and Tobago. And the state has a responsibility.
Yes.
To have a link, an effective link between Trinidad and Tobago, in this case, sea and air. Right? It is not a profit driven. That can't be that's a social and national issue, right?
That's right.
So CAL in its budgeting should be putting aside a subvention, well, the state, let me see the Ministry of Finance, a subvention that covers that cost. And if the airline can generate the money to match that, fine. If not, it kicks in. Because that is an essential service. And to amalgamate and say, well, the whole airline is not making profit, and you lump that in, to me is really stupid.
Because Paul, I couldn't agree with you more.
It is not the same thing as the regional international legs of the operations.
But not just that, the point is they have engaged in flights of fancy and all sorts of frolics whereby they are frittering away millions and billions in other regional and international ventures. Remember, they were thinking of, I think at one point, some flight from Brazil, right? Then we see them expanding now. You have flights going to St. Kitts. You have flights going to Cuba. You right? So the question
I can stand corrected by that. My understanding, and I cannot substantiate it, but I'll suggest it anyway, is that they have they bought new craft and plan to explore linkages to South America. Now, this is not the first iteration of Cal trying to maximize new routes for profits, but it always seems like it ends up in a folly after a while because it falls flat. The airline starts to go from profitable to sinking, and then everything turns old mass.
Of course. And then let's not forget that they purchased Air Jamaica. Remember? So in other words, you are a drowning, sinking airline, but yet still you go in and buy another drowning, sinking airline.
That was a friend thing.
No, but we cannot afford to
I agree.
Business on the basis of friendship if you're talking about the national coffers. So I mean that's so absurd because Air Jamaica losing millions and billions, you losing millions and billions, but yet still you going and buy out another drowning airline. Look at Sir Richard Branson. I mean, one of the world's greatest entrepreneurs. Look at the trouble he has had trying to keep Virgin afloat, the airlines. Airlines are risky, they are risky ventures. So therefore, if you are already losing money, how on earth could you ever see it making sense that you go in and buy another losing airline? That's like two drunk men, one trying to lead the other one home. They will never get there.
And then the cultural differences that came out where Jamaicans felt offended. Some Jamaicans felt offended and they stopped flying the craft.
And not just that, remember also, we had scenarios where Jamaican Airlines had previously incurred so many penalties at international airports because of so many drug busts that occurred on their craft. And you go in and inherit that? I mean, I don't know. How on earth could you then tell anybody that, oh, well, you can't put on more flights on the Tobago run because the Tobago run is not profitable after you've been, wasting money in the hundreds of millions on foolish ventures like that. So these are the concerns I have. And I fully agree with you, Paul, that they have to change their thinking and understand that this is an essential service you are offering. And I mean, just a simple suggestion I have given there in terms of the three-tiered fare, I think that alone can help to bring in more revenue if they are serious.
Well, if we could switch now, I see the political scenario in Tobago is also still very interesting and fertile. Where Mr. Duke, after getting the resounding beating in Trinidad local government election, has said he's scaling back and he's now extended, the olive branch to Mr. Augustine. He said he's tried to contact Mr. Augustine several times and Mr. Augustine has not answered him. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, the thing is, it is clear that after receiving a beating like a Good Friday Boboli in Trinidad, Watson Duke is clearly desperately seeking relevance. Remember the movie some years ago, Desperately Seeking Susan? Well, he's desperately seeking Farley. Because at the end of the day, the scenario now is that he needs Farley, but Farley does not need him. It's plain and simple as that. Mr. Duke has engaged in these forays into, all sorts of follies, such as saying he wants to be the mayor of Port of Spain. Does he even have a clue as to how the mayor of Port of Spain is chosen? You have to win the Port of Spain corporation. That means all the aldermen will then have to decide who is going to be the mayor. You don't even have a toehold there, but yet still you are going to come publicly and talk rubbish.
I don't like that phrase, toehold. Oh my God. That's a fortunate phrase to use in this circumstance. You get to rephrase that, Councillor.
Martin, it came out innocent. It came out innocent,
Mr. Duke.
I don't think you should be using toehold when we're talking about Watson Duke. I ain't good at all. But I don't think the toe was held on to very well at all in any case. But I digress.
Oh my God, fellas, you're all gonna kill me. Oh my God, yes, good point. But the thing is, and so Tobagonians are asking questions as to, well, hey, wait, just so it's only because you got licks down there, you're now coming back, talking to us, saying that, oh, well, you're ready to extend the olive branch. I mean, the point is, I don't think anybody is going to be fooled or, convinced by this last ditch attempt at reconciliation or rapprochement, because, basically you have a scenario where two man rat can't live in one hole. And if you already got rid of one of the
There
man
you
rats,
go with these euphemisms that are inappropriate again.
oh my God, I
You
think it's
can't be
only because
using
it's
those
Watson Duke.
euphemisms with Duke and Fally. It is highly inappropriate. I am defending liability. It's seriously related to this platform.
Oh my God.
Is Duke politically over?
Yes,
Yes.
we said that
I
already.
asked you, Wendell. I asked Martin George.
But we established that long time.
Well, the thing is, he's a street fighter. Let's not forget that. He's a street fighter. He could get down and dirty at a moment's notice. All right. And he does have, his base in Roxborough. So I would imagine that he can probably still carry that seat in the THA election. So I wouldn't say that his days are over, but certainly he needs a bush bath. He needs to bathe with some blue soap and, whatever other local remedies they
in
have
a bathtub.
to cleanse. Yes, seriously, because I don't think in his present iteration he has much relevance outside of his little area of Roxborough.
I think the question should be asked, one of the questions should be asked, where is he getting the financing from to spend all this money on all these elections?
Wendell,
offering serious money in Port of Spain.
Wendell, UNC, where he getting the money from?
No, I'm lost. Where's he getting the money from, Martin George? You just said that you deal with empiricism and hard facts. Where's he getting the money from?
UNC, Paul. UNC, Paul.
I have nothing else to say.
The subtlety of it.
I have nothing else to say.
No, but it's
asked that. Wendell, I asked an innocent question.
You did.
All right, so let's get back into seriousness now. So all right, we are going into a new parliamentary session. I doubt that the autonomy issue is going to come up in this parliamentary session again, unfortunately.
Is that a husky, Martin?
It's a Samoyed.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, a Russian dog.
Nice.
What do you expect as a citizen of Tobago, well, Trinidad and Tobago, but as a resident of Tobago, in the last quarter of this year, moving into 2024?
In terms of the issue of autonomy?
Not autonomy generally, but I mean, the political scene has been so tumultuous. Tobagonians, to me, have been beat up because they asked for a change. They demanded a change by their vote. The change has been tumultuous at best. There's so much has happened in the last 9 months in Trinidad and Tobago, and in particular Tobago. And now, whatever the machinations are, people want better lives. People want stability.
Yes. Well, interestingly enough, and Paul, it appears that for whatever reason, it appears that Tobagonians seem in some way to be allowing the TPP and Mr. Fali Augustine and his team to have a chance to prove themselves. I think they recognize that, look, yes, they've made mistakes and they are a neophyte bunch who appear not to always at times have the best advice or the best advisors around them. But it seems that Tobagonians at this point generally are still willing to allow them the opportunity to, get it right. So, I think Mr. Augustine has a really wonderful opportunity because he's getting a blight from Tobagonians generally to say, well, hey, listen, boy, we're giving you a chance, settle yourself, get this right. But the point is he needs to get it right because you have the PNM waiting in the wings. They are not going to roll over and die because they recognize the importance of Tobago, particularly in the national context with the 2 Tobago seats. You see, so really and truly, the general election of 2025 is going to be largely pivotal on those 2 Tobago seats because when you look at the current numbers, you have 23-18 You take 2 from 23, you're down to 21. You add 2 to 18, you're up to 20. You know, if you understand me. So therefore, basically, you're talking about one seat there could swing the balance of power. So therefore, those 2 Tobago seats are critical in terms of the context of the general election. And I mean, we imagine that the PNM is fully aware of that, because I don't think there's any party that is as good as preparing themselves or fighting elections as the PNM. They have the years of experience, and they have the gravitas and the know-how and the political machinery, a well-oiled political machinery. So they know very well that those 2 Tobago seats are going to be critical. Mr. Duke also knows that. Mr. Augustine also knows that, because you heard Mr. Augustine talking already about winning those 2 seats and then looking to leverage that. Mr. Duke has said the same thing. So everybody's eyeing those 2 Tobago seats. And as I said, so also will be the PNM.
That's true. But the current iteration is 2219, though. So it's
2219.
It's a lot closer than you think. Yeah.
Which makes it worse. That's right. Yes, you're correct. Which makes it worse. Yes.
You're correct. The 2 Tobago
but yes, Tobago can be the king or queen maker. Tobago can be the king or queen maker very easily, you know.
Yes, that's right. Let's not forget St. Vincent, where you know, with 1 seat, James' son Mitchell became prime minister, because their total was 15, and you had 7-7, and he had 1 seat, and with his one was greater than 7.
How do you assess the outcome of the LG in terms of performance of both parties?
Well, when one looks at it, I mean, while with the corporations being split evenly 7-7, one may be tempted to say there was no clear winner. I would say that there was a clear loser, in the sense that the PNM being incumbent, so to speak, in central government, and with the erosion into some of the areas where they held, you know, power, the loss of 1 or 2 seats of councillors, I would say that if you were to declare a loser as opposed to declaring a winner, I would say that the PNM lost. You know, you also look at the body language and you heard the words from the Prime Minister. Those were not the words of a winner when he says it could have been worse. That is not what you say when you win. You know, nobody wins something and then says, well, it could have been worse. No. So I think clearly they recognize that they've lost
the implication is he was expecting worse.
Yes, I think the polls
well, and that's my point. That's my point. That's my point. So therefore, you look at it and you recognize that, look, it's not a scenario where they can, you know, go back to Balizé House, you know, rejoicing and singing Kumbaya and saying, well, yes, you know, we scored a resounding victory. You know, on the other hand, you also had this scenario where the UNC has not been able to make any significant inroads in areas outside of their traditional strongholds. And that has always been the problem of the UNC. And I'll tell you why.
Just to interject in that, the UNC ceded several of those divisions to the NTA. Was that strategically profitable, or did the NTA have a positive impact on them?
Paul, that's the point I'm coming to. The UNC has always appeared, and this is just my simple view, they have always appeared afraid to make any serious foray into their non-traditional areas. They love staying in their comfort zones. So they will go to their traditional areas and preach to the converted. They will preach to the choir, and they love the adulation and the praise and the, you know, the shouting and clapping and, you know, that they get from their own hardcore supporters, instead of saying, well, hey, listen, we already have those in the bag. Let us really make a concerted effort and a concerted push to expand beyond our traditional areas. Instead, what they like to do is stay in the background and finance others and say, all right, you go and you fight there, you fight there, you fight there. That's what they like doing. And at the end of the day, you have to show that courage and that willingness to really transform yourself out of your traditional areas into a national party by saying, hey, listen, all right, we're setting up a permanent, you know, center in Laventille where we will be doing work, we will be, focusing on the beta, regardless, win, lose, or draw. We are here to stay. They need to show that sustainability. Instead, what they love doing is coming around election time, handing out a mattress, a stove, a $300 wrap up in a jersey, etc. And they think that people will be fooled by that. And we have seen in the past that the people take the money, they take the stove, they take the mattress, and then they go and they vote for whoever they want.
You could not have said it better. And you know why too? They always say some ridiculous, disgusting, divisive statement, which is why they avoid those areas. They avoid those areas because of that. Because their true colors will eventually show themselves. That's what they do.
In terms of campaign, do you think because there are two markedly different campaigns. One was pretty cerebral to me, and in reform with the PNM, focusing on the local government reform. And one was, where's the word? I don't want to use the word exploiting, but focused on national security and citizen security in terms of UNC security, cocket back, reload, etc.
Right. And the thing is, Paul, you're quite right in terms of their approaches. They had two totally different approaches. And, I would think that actually the PNM's cerebral approach is one that only appeals to a very small subsector of the population. Let's be honest. The general masses, they love the platform rhetoric, they move along the bacchanal, they cock it back and rock it back and unload the clip. And they love that kind of gun talk on the political platform, whether figuratively or literally. So I think that in that regard, Kamala's campaign resonated with quite a few people. But then, as I pointed out, I think when we discussed this, I'm not sure if it's with you, it might have been with one of the lesser stations.
So many to choose from.
I made the point that there appeared to be a subtle subcontext, and this points to what Wendell is speaking to, of a racial element in the way that message was being portrayed and parlayed. And I urged the opposition leader to be careful to ensure that she makes that clear distinction, that it's not a sense of basically, okay, what does a bandit look like? Good, we're going and shoot that kind of person. If you understand me, we have to be careful with that type of rhetoric, So therefore, I think that would have backfired among persons who might have been on the fence or who may have been opposed to the UNC. They certainly would not have supported her in that rhetoric. So again, her appeal, as I say, resonated with her base, right? So, what they do, they are mining votes. They keep digging deeper and deeper among their own hardcore supporters, and they're getting more votes in their traditional areas, which they will win anyhow. So in other words, you're winning by a bigger margin.
But I don't agree with Mrs. Pasabi-Sessa's use, because I think the language is too inflammatory and a bit irresponsible in some instances. I think it resonated. I agree with you. With more than just her base.
Yes.
Because everybody is feeling the effects of crime.
Right, yes, of course.
I think you might have missed what Martin said there, Paul, because he's saying, yes, it did, but it would have, the interpretation at the end of the day was divisive. And
right, that's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Speaking of crime, is a good segue before we end. The police service, Mrs. Harewood Christopher, I think, if I'm not mistaken, she was appointed in November last year. Would that be correct? And given the year past her birthday or something like that, when that scenario came up.
Her extension was in May, I think.
In May. How do you think the service is doing under Mrs. Harewood Christopher presently?
Well, it seems that I saw a report where the goodly Minister of National Security chose not to even comment on the performance of the Commissioner of Police. And I thought to myself, well, maybe for once we are seeing a scenario where, the minister decided to remain silent and, use the wisdom of silence as his option, because we saw where Miss Christopher herself has had a penchant for giving herself ratings which don't seem to reflect public sentiment in any way, shape, form, or fashion. We saw it at the Police Association at their Sports and Family Day. We saw it at the Independence Day, celebrations, where she used a comparison quite curiously of one murder difference, to the date between last year and this year, to say, well, our strategies are working. Really, you planned and worked this down to such a science that you worked it out that you would have one murder less after 8 months? Really? Okay, so let's go 3-4 days later. Let's go to now, where we are past 400 murders. Compare it to last year's figures. Where does that leave us? I mean, come on, you're insulting the intelligence of the population.
Not a great communicator, and I see that with no reservation at all. But to be fair, on the other side of the conversation, the police have had some successes. They dealt with the 3D machine printing scenario. They broke up a meth lab. They broke up another type of synthetic drug lab. They've had some successes. I don't think they've maximized them well.
I mean, there's the $21 million cocaine fine.
$21 million
yes. So I understand that, Paul. I understand that. But my point is, the true measure of the success of the police service in this regard has to do with how each and every one of us feels. Do you feel safer and more secure when you go about your daily activities, that you can go out on an evening or a night to a restaurant, go to a movie, go to the theater, go and see a good play, hopefully something by Richard Raghubal Singh or some other, actor, where you can now take your family out and you can feel safe and say, well, yes, I can come back home without looking behind, without checking to see if anybody's following me, without checking to see if there's somebody waiting by my gate. That is really the true measure of it. And, I have friends who tell me they feel much safer and more secure when they go abroad and they, then they could relax and let their hair down and, that kind of thing, as opposed to when they're back in Trinidad.
I think the answer to that is no for me. But added to that is, I think if the public got a sense or had a feeling that the police had the criminals under siege and they were subduing them, it would also add to that feeling.
Of course, indeed. And I don't think the public feels that way. And that, I think, is really the true measure of it. But, gentlemen, I have to ask to be excused. I realize I have another appointment.
and I know checkout time is coming up, so. You have a checkout time?
Hey,
thank you for being with us. Always a pleasure.
Mobilar and Bacchanal Station.
Is you talk about
like it like that?
Property Victor in it is you talk about two men not telling in the same hole.
And good morning and goodbye. I am leaving.
Check out for who? He is home. I saw his Russian samurai.
I am leaving. Goodbye.